What happens when a child, once introduced to the world as part of a Hollywood fairy tale, grows up and quietly begins rewriting that story for herself? For years, Zahara Jolie was seen through a lens she never chose, the adopted daughter of Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, raised inside one of the most photographed families on Earth. From the beginning, her name was tied to fame, adoption, and a life transformed by celebrity. But that is no longer the whole story. Today, Zahara is becoming something far more compelling, a young woman with her own identity, presence, and direction. The world first noticed her because of the family she entered. People are paying attention now because they are beginning to see a quiet transformation unfold. Not loud, not dramatic, but meaningful. The little girl once framed by other people's spotlight is slowly stepping into one that feels like her own. And that changes the story completely. When Angelina Jolie adopted Zahara from Ethiopia in 2005, the public quickly turned that moment into a symbol of rescue, second chances, and celebrity motherhood. But for Zahara, it was the beginning of a much more complicated life. Growing up in one of the most famous families in the world meant she was never allowed to simply be a child in private. Cameras followed, headlines formed around her before she was old enough to shape any part of them. For years, Zahara appeared beside Angelina at red carpets, public events, and humanitarian trips. She was visible, recognizable, and constantly framed as part of something much larger than herself. Yet even then, there was something distinct about her presence. She did not seem like someone performing for attention. She seemed calm, composed, and quietly self-contained. Looking back, that quietness feels important now. While the world focused on glamour and the Jolie Pitt image, Zahara seemed to be developing something more grounded underneath it all. She was learning how to live inside the spotlight without letting it fully define her. As she grew older, something began to shift. Zahara was no longer seen only as Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt's daughter. Little by little, she started to come across as someone with her own center of gravity. That shift became much harder to ignore when she entered Spelman College in Atlanta, one of the most respected historically black women's colleges in the United States. That choice felt meaningful far beyond education. It suggested that Zahara was stepping into a space shaped by culture, history, sisterhood, and self-discovery, rather than Hollywood fame. It felt like a quiet but clear move toward building a life on her own terms. Then came the moment that changed the conversation around her almost instantly. During her Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority introduction, Zahara identified herself as Zahara Marley Jolie. It was not dramatic, but it landed with real force. In that brief moment, many people felt they were seeing something deeply personal, without Zahara ever needing to explain it. For years, the public had known her through a family name loaded with attention and history. But here, she seemed to be introducing herself in a way that felt more intentional, more personal, and more reflective of who she was becoming. Whether symbolic, private, or simply natural to this new chapter, the effect was the same. People stopped looking at her only as a celebrity child and started seeing a young woman taking quiet ownership of her own identity. That is where her story becomes more interesting than a typical update about a famous family. This is no longer just about where Zahara goes to school or which event she appeared at. It is about authorship. It is about a young woman deciding how she wants to be seen in a world that had already been telling her story for years. What makes Zahara's transformation especially compelling is that it does not feel staged. She does not come across as someone trying to break away through rebellion, controversy, or loud public gestures. In fact, the opposite seems true. Her growth has unfolded in a way that feels steady, understated, and real. And that is exactly why it resonates. For so long, Zahara was viewed as someone being protected by the powerful world around her. But now, that dynamic appears to be changing. She no longer seems like just the young daughter being guided through life inside a famous family. She increasingly comes across as a young woman whose perspective carries weight of its own. That difference matters because there is a quiet but meaningful gap between being protected and being respected. Public commentary over the years has sometimes suggested that Angelina Jolie's children, including Zahara, have influenced conversations around her, even in creative spaces tied to major projects. Whether those influences were public or private, direct or subtle, the larger point remains powerful. Zahara no longer feels like someone simply standing inside her mother's world. She seems to be growing into someone who can shape the space around her as well. That is a major transition. Her presence is no longer defined only by closeness to celebrity, but by contribution, confidence, and self-possession. And perhaps that is why Zahara stands out more now than she did as a child. Back then, people noticed her because of where she was. Today, they notice her because of who she appears to be becoming. There's a calm strength in that evolution, and it gives her story a different kind of depth. This is no longer the image of a child being introduced to the world through someone else's fame. It is the image of a young woman slowly proving that she has her own place in it. That may be the most striking part of Zahara's journey. In a culture obsessed with famous families, many celebrity children end up taking one of two paths. Some build careers directly from the attention that has followed them since childhood. Others spend years trying to escape the weight of a name the public never lets them forget. But Zahara's path feels different from both. She does not seem eager to capitalize on fame, and she does not appear to be fighting loudly against it either. Instead, she seems to be doing something much harder. She is building a life grounded in education, community, identity, in personal growth, while the world continues to view her through a celebrity lens. That balance is not easy. When someone grows up under that level of public attention, even the smallest personal decision can become a headline or a symbol people project meaning onto. That is why Zahara's quietness feels so powerful. It is not emptiness, it is control. It suggests that she does not need to explain herself to make an impression. She only needs to keep moving forward in a way that feels true to who she is. So, what is Zahara Jolie's life like now? The clearest answer is that she appears to be entering a new chapter with confidence, stability, and a growing sense of self. Not in a way that feels loud or attention-seeking, but in a way that feels deeply personal. She is studying, building community, and stepping more fully into spaces that seem to reflect who she is, rather than simply where she came from. That is what makes this moment in her life so compelling. For years, Zahara was introduced to the public through adoption, celebrity, and the extraordinary fame of the Jolie Pitt family. But the more she grows, the more that old framing feels incomplete, because what people are seeing now is not just a famous daughter getting older. They are seeing a young woman gradually taking ownership of her own narrative. She is creating an identity that feels separate from Hollywood, even while the world still watches her through a Hollywood lens. That is difficult for anyone, especially for someone whose image was shaped by public attention long before adulthood. Yet, Zahara seems to be managing that transition with a kind of calm that makes her story stand out even more. In the end, that may be the most powerful part of all. Zahara's journey is no longer simply about where she came from or whose daughter she is. It is about evolution. It is about a young woman who was first known because of global fame, but who is now slowly, clearly, and confidently becoming someone people want to understand on her own terms. And maybe that is why her story resonates right now. Not because she is chasing the spotlight,
but because she no longer seems to need it. The world may have first meant Zahara as part of one of Hollywood's most famous families, but the most interesting story now is the one she appears to be writing for herself.